exact hour, the United States of America does not have a functioning government. The Trump Dictatorship and the Library of Congress, which Mike Johnson runs via a porn app, deleted part of the Constitution yesterday. I'll just say that again. Deleted part of the Constitution yesterday. Deleted that part of the Constitution that limits the suspension of habeas corpus and bans presidents from accepting foreign bribes. The library says this was a coding error and it would be fixed soon-ish. Coding error. Yeah, the coding in Trump's DNA. The White House had to deny that the White House chief of staff was to meet last night with the vice president, the attorney general, the deputy attorney general, and the FBI director to discuss what to do about the Trumpstein disaster, the Trump-Epstein cover-up scandal, and also what to do with the recording of the deputy attorney general's 2 days' worth of bargaining with a convicted pedophile and child sex trafficker. And nobody seemed to notice that the real headline in that was, whatever the chief of staff, AG, deputy AG, and FBI director were meeting with the vice president about, the president was not going to be there. There is right now no competent executive authority, no congressional or Senate oversight, no reliable judiciary. The United States of America does not now have a functioning government. The nominal president, a lunatic, has spent the last few days making up economic statistics and poll numbers and threatening his predecessors with prosecution for imaginary crimes punishable by death, while he, the nominal president, wanders around the roof of the White House and phones into a business TV network spewing racist moronity, the content of which is just this side of a 19th century minstrel show. Or, while he continues to get more and more in bed, figuratively, with a convicted pedophile and child sex trafficker in a scheme to cover up her crimes, her late partner's crimes, and whatever the president's role was or was not in those crimes. And the first and seventh people in the line of presidential succession were going to have dinner with their Epstein expert who just met with Ghislaine Maxwell. And they were going to dine with the head of the FBI and the woman who actually runs the White House, but not the president. And you know, it almost doesn't matter if they were meeting to try to figure out what to do about Trumpstein or not. What are they meeting for? With the vice president, but not the president. The United States of America does not now have a functioning government. By 3:14 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the Library of Congress said Sections 8, 9, and 10 of the first article of the Constitution were back online. So, shrug emoji. I guess there are limits on emoluments and on suspending habeas corpus. For now. 15 minutes later, however, there were still huge swaths of all three of those sections of the first article that were missing from the official online version of the Constitution, but just coding. And so what? It's just the online version, not the real one. What's the difference? Well, Trump just fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because she would not delete the official online jobs numbers, and he will soon find somebody to post fabricated numbers online, which will then be accepted as real and official and online because they're online. There is no functioning government, just a mediocre public relations firm, an understaffed mediocre public relations firm, which is trying to sell the governmental equivalent of Edsels and Google Glasses and New Coke and fascism. Happily, that firm, the new NGO, USA PR Inc., is still insistent on keeping Trumpstein in the news. Thank goodness they can get that right. Release the tapes or the transcripts of Todd Blanche talking to Maxwell for 2 days, in which she says, oh no, Trump was uninvolved. Don't believe those pictures. and after which she was then coincidentally, maybe accidentally, moved from her jail cell in Debs Behind Bars, Florida, to Club Fed in Texas. You're going to release those tapes and then try to explain why she was moved and create yet another Trumpstein scandal? What, number 73? And this decision to release or not release was made only after they met with everybody except Trump? After Trump brought Trumpstein up again at an event about the Olympics.
Were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department...
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
And do you believe that she is...
It's not a very uncommon thing.
Do you believe that she's credible to be listening to? Your Deputy Attorney General sat down with her recently.
Well, let me tell you, he's a very talented man. His name is Todd Blanche. He's a very legitimate person, very high, I just a very highly thought of person, respected by everybody. And I didn't talk to him about it, but I will tell you that whatever he asked would be totally appropriate, and it's not an uncommon thing to do that. And I think he probably wants to make sure that, people that should not be involved or aren't involved are not hurt by something that would be very, very unfortunate, very unfair to a lot of people.
For her part, Maxwell does not want that interview released or the Epstein files and lists released. And Trump has sent Congressman, somebody has to be the 431st best Congressman, James Comer, to demand depositions about Epstein from Democrats because somebody in a dictatorship has to do the dumbest jobs, and that somebody is Jamie Comer. Demanded depositions from everybody except Trump and except the ex-Attorney General Bill Barr, and it was the Congressman Steve Cohen who again asked, what did Barr do with the Epstein videos and films and images confiscated after the FBI under Barr's administration raided Epstein's townhouse in New York, these many years ago? And the political commentator Charlemagne the God pointed out that when he criticized Trump on Fox about Trumpstein, he never mentioned race once. But then Trump called him a racist. Charlemagne added this quote, shows how authoritarians will attempt to bully people into pushing false narratives, and added, quote, I need you, that is Trump, to keep the promises of a great economy and the promises of transparency with the Epstein files. And if your head is spinning because once again there is so much Trumpstein news, what do you mean there was a Trumpstein dinner with the Vice President, the Chief of Staff, the Attorney General, the FBI Chief, and without Trump? Huh? What? What do you mean? You couldn't even make up a good cover story for why you do that? If your head is spinning because of that, remember, it doesn't matter. The point was summarized in the movie The Manchurian Candidate. The point is, Trumpstein lives. Trumpstein expands. Trumpstein abides. Are they saying, are there any communists in the Defense Department? Of course not. They're saying, how many communists are there in the Defense Department? Trumpstein now, Trumpstein tomorrow. You've already heard me say it. You know the rest. Quote of the week about Trump, a clear winner, the utterly unself-aware and utterly unintentionally hilarious nutjob Charlie Kirk. Quoting Charlie Kirk, there's a lot you can call Donald Trump. No one has ever called him feminine. I paused there because you wouldn't have heard anything I said while you were laughing. Trump is a giant middle finger to all the screeching hall monitors that attacked young men for just existing. He's a giant FU to the feminist establishment. I'm sorry. No one has ever called Trump feminine? Donald Trump, for 30 years at least, every day slathers on enough makeup every day, not for being on TV, but just for being out among people, slathers on enough makeup every day to completely cover all of the New York Radio City Rockettes and their backup team. And at the age of 79, he dyes his hair and eyebrows yellow. That is as goddamned feminine as it gets. My mother never did any of that. My grandmother, who died wearing makeup, never did any of that. Never called him feminine. Holy cow. He's wearing bronzer. That's the quote of the week about Trump. And as always, we have a dozen quotes of the week by Trump. The most meaningful one, if you continue to harbor the belief that the third term, or as we call it, the dictatorship talk is just trolling, Trump went on CNBC and between his other lies said of an illegal, unconstitutional civil war starting third term, quote, "I'd like to run. I have the best poll numbers I've ever had. You know why? Because people love the tariffs." Even the CNBC people had to correct him on all of that, all of which is wrong. The Daily Beast corrected him. Quote, "Trump's comments come as the Real Clear Politics polling aggregator shows Trump's approval rating is 5 points underwater with just 46% of Americans approving. It should be noted that 5 points underwater is the best Trump polling. 46% approval is the best Trump number because Real Clear Politics is a bullshit fascist site that cooks the polling books, uses discredited polls, sometimes uses brand new ones to try to make things look better than they are for Trump. Elliot Morris's strength in numbers has Trump's approval not at 46%, but at 37%. Gallup has just measured Trump among independents, approval 29%. More independents like the makeup job he does on himself than his policies. Hell, that Susie Wiles dinner might have been about how to get him out of the White House. One thing they might explore as an alternative is seeing if he could become a farm worker. The reports are beginning to trickle in about crops rotting in the fields. Now it is cherries in Oregon. Half the workers from one of the big cherry farms, gone. $300,000 worth of cherries, gone. That's just this spring and summer's cherries. Never mind all the cherries yet to be gone. It is so bad that even Trump has noted and responded and seemed to be laying the groundwork for backing off the deportation of farm workers. He did it in the most possibly racist way. I mean, listen to this, what he says here. He could be quoting from an episode of Amos and Andy.
We're taking care of our farmers. We can't let our farmers not have anybody, these people, you can't replace them very easily. People that live in the inner city are not doing that work. They're just not doing that work. And they've tried, we've tried, everybody tried. They don't do it. These people do it naturally. I said, what happens if they get it to a farmer the other day? What happens if they get a bad back? He said, they don't get a bad back, sir, because if they get a bad back, they die. I said, that's interesting, isn't it? These are very, in many ways, they're very, very special people.
If this sounds like something you read back in high school, that's because it's just what every slave owner said as a rationalization of slavery in 1859. They're good at it. Oh, and by the way, with all of this, we have not even gotten yet to Trump wandering around on the White House roof. We haven't gotten to it yet.
Mr. President, what are you doing up there?
Come down and talk to us.
What are you building?
As one internet wag put it, the premiere of Fat on a Hot Tin Roof. You may have seen Trump on the roof of the White House the other day, the video of it at least, and wondered if you were awake, or what had happened now to this timeline, or who had screwed up the universe, or what could possibly be next. I saw that and I said, I've seen this before. I have seen Trump do this before. I have been there in person as Trump has done this before. Not the roof part. If it had been the roof part, I'd have been playing the Patricia Neal role from the great movie A Face in the Crowd, which I will circle back to later, which concerns the subject of guys on roofs. But I've seen that look of him wandering around, leading a bunch of people who are pretending that he's not doing something really crazy, stupid, or wasting time. And I have been there within feet of him as he has done it. The look in his eye of, I know what all of this is. I'm a builder. I could have been a architect, when he's lucky if he can successfully construct a good lie. What's all this over here? Are these storm drains or vents or shrubbery? Is that a Martian or a tree? He doesn't know what he's doing. He's not a builder. He's not an architect. He's not a designer. He just has money and pays other people to do it and slaps his name on it. This is his life. It's not even his money. It's just his name. In fact, it's not even his name. It's his father's name. The story that I saw was about the elevator and the gym at 200 East 69th Street, what was formerly, until they all got their money together and took his name off of it, Trump Palace. A somewhat exaggerated name for a halfway decent apartment building on the Upper East Side of New York, in which I lived from the year 2007 to the year 2016 until I couldn't stand it anymore and sold my apartment at a loss, which was the last apartment sold in that building for several years, because I recognized, in the one time I've ever been smart about real estate, that whether he won or lost the 2016 election, his name as a conveyance for real estate was dead, as it now is, certainly in New York. So I sold and got out. But a few years previously, he had written me a fan letter. I've discussed this before. It was about a commentary I did on ESPN2 about Ted Turner, and he wrote me a fan letter, and obviously I couldn't stop him. He had my address. I had met him previously at NBC. I had met him in the 1980s. It feels like the 1880s. It was a long time ago, and I knew him, and it was like, oh, no, here he is again. I decided to take advantage of the fan letter, which is how I wound up seeing the look on his face as he wandered around the roof aimlessly and mindlessly, while projecting, at least in his own mind, a sense of being the great constructor. Well, the con part is correct. What I wrote him back to take advantage of this fandom was to try to approach him on the subject of the deteriorating condition of the building in which I lived. He didn't own it. It was called Trump Palace, but it was just managed by his company. The building had its own separate ownership, and obviously the apartments were owned by us suckers who'd bought there. And I thought if I could play on this, I could get him to do something about what was happening, which was, number one, the elevators had basically stopped working, and a lot of members of the staff had worked very hard to hold them together, but it was time to do something about the elevators and various other sundry problems in the infrastructure of this building. So I wrote a letter, and I must say I got a call almost immediately from one of his staffers who later explained that that's the way they treated people. Well, they were treating people with celebrity kind of names this way. They didn't treat the average person who lived in a Trump building. They just were afraid I'd go public. Or they could claim credit for my success because I lived in their building. You'll remember the story about Derek Jeter of the New York Yankees breaking his ankle and Trump announcing that he had broken his ankle because he'd sold his apartment in another Trump building, because that's the way Trump thinks, or doesn't think, as the case may be. So now let me take you back to this time when I saw him with the same look on his face and the same meandering, I'm just supervising this because I have to make the final decision. I'll make the decision about where the giant electric Trump sign with the picture of me goes on the roof of the White House, where that look comes from and what it indicates about him. And also how it, for a moment, made me think that we were finally approaching the only possible literary ending to the Trump presidency. And it evoked, again, the movie A Face in the Crowd and Patricia Neal and Andy Griffith. But I'm diverging past the point of you understanding what I'm saying anymore. So I'll get back to this. I write him about the elevators. They call me and they say he's going to come in and inspect the elevators on such and such a day and see what the problem really is. And my argument was, it's your name on the building. When my name is on something, I take personal responsibility for it. I'm only doing TV shows here. You do a TV show and you have buildings. You can materially do something much more easily about the buildings than I can about my TV shows. I'm sure you found the same thing. And sure enough, he showed up right at the hour that was announced, and I was fairly impressed by that. And in he walked. And by the way, for those of you scoring at home, he's about, at least he was in 2013, about my height, and I'm about 6'3.5". So that part may not be an exaggeration, although he did look heavier than I did at those days, and I was pretty heavy. I was probably about 265 then. Anyway. He walks in, he comes over, shakes my hand, and in person, he can be exactly the charmer that the people who believe he's not insane think he is. And you sit there going, wait a minute, what is this? Doesn't line up with the other guy. And my initial thought in 2013 was there's a real problem here because there are at least two different Donald Trump personalities, and that's always a bad sign. It doesn't really matter which one is the right one, the good one or the evil one, that they're both there, that's a bad sign. My first objection to him running for president was I didn't think we should have a president with a totally split personality. Then we found out what the split personality was, a cover for the real horrible personality. Okay. So he's in there and he's inspecting the elevators and he's inspecting the other problems and he's quizzing me about the things I wrote in the letter. And he says, we're going to get right on it. Thanks for it. I enjoy the show. You're doing great work. Keep up the good work. And call me anytime. My number's on the letter. Call me. And off he goes. And a week later, there's a big announcement inside Trump Palace. They are going to remodel the gym. What about the elevators, the other problems with the electrical outlets, the failing heating and air conditioning ducts, and the internal structure that now creates a slamming noise on 6 or 7 of the floors, and the other things that were the gym. And it was explained to me by the manager of the building, was a very nice guy named Bill. Bill explained to me that the problem with doing what I did was you simply send him into your building and he starts looking at it, and he doesn't remember what you said was the problem. He just sees what he sees. And he sees something that he didn't think looked gold enough. The gym, which was on the ground floor and actually had windows onto the street, was one of the first things you would see if you got a tour of Trump Palace. It was over to the left of the main stand, the main business desk, the concierge area, the lobby, and then the gym. And you could see the gym, and you could see it from the street. And he didn't like any of the equipment in the gym, so he tore out the entire gym. Obviously, he didn't pay for that. We, the people who owned the apartments, paid for that, and it was tens or 20s or 30s of thousands of dollars. And we all got charged for it, and the new equipment, none of it worked, and the matting didn't fit, and all of the good machines were taken out, and bad machines, gold machines, were put in its place. And I learned a great lesson there, which was, yes, he's just as crazy now as he was when you met him in 1983. So that look on his face is, I'm in my element. I am the master of building. I'm better than my father was at this. I can build anything. We could rebuild the entire White House. We could make it 274 stories tall. When somebody shouted, are you thinking of putting on an addition, a second floor? I thought, oh, God, don't suggest that to him. The thing will be 276 stories tall before the end of the month. Whatever it is that he plans to do is not what the White House needs and not structurally what it can support, and nothing that will help anybody but him. Just count on that. However, as I said, in a more metaphorical and symbolic way, I saw two other things. The first was I saw the famous Andy Griffith film, A Face in the Crowd. If you have never seen A Face in the Crowd, stop playing this podcast right now and go and find it. Stream it, buy it, borrow it from somebody, steal it out of a library somewhere, and watch A Face in the Crowd, in which Andy Griffith portrays a populist, a bum, a criminal who rises literally from the floor of a jail, I believe in Arkansas, and through various circumstances, one of which is he gets his own populist television show, becomes the advisor to presidents, and is on the verge of running for president himself. And I won't spoil it any further, except to say that the character that Andy Griffith plays, Lonesome Rhodes, is so evil that Andy Griffith, in interviews that he did after this film was completed in 1957, and it's Elia Kazan, after this film was completed, Andy Griffith said he would never do any part like that again. And the reason that he only played lovable sheriffs from Bumpkinville, Carolina, or lovable elderly lawyers who are far smarter than they seem from Bumpkinville, Illinois, the reason he only played sweet old nice guys and good pillars of the community was that the role of Lonesome Rhodes, the populist, brought out evil in his own personality that he never wanted to experience again. Andy Griffith could have been one of the great horrible actors of all time, one of the great evil characters. If in another world he says, no, I think this is my calling, he could have been Darth Vader. Only they wouldn't have put a helmet on it, because the look in his eyes when he was being evil in that film is extraordinary. I know what he saw. He could see it on the screen. And if it was in you, you would never want it to come out again unless you were Donald Trump. So at the end of it, he is at the top of his tower, and he has given away, and I will not spoil it any further if you've not seen the film, he's given away his popularity with one act. And they've all left him, and he's up there. And the woman who put him there was named Marcia, and she's portrayed by Patricia Neal, the great actress. And she's standing at the bottom of this giant home of his, this duplex, I believe, somewhere on the Central Park area of New York. One of the sides of Central Park, never made clear, could be Central Park South, Central Park West, Fifth Avenue, and he's standing on the balcony and he's going, I'll jump, I'll jump. And she stops and looks at him, and Patricia Neal, who's always been a sweetheart in this film and has put up with everything from this man, suddenly starts screaming, jump! Do everybody a favor already and jump! So that's what I thought of as well, in addition to my own experience watching him look around, asking, what is this? Is it a power station? Is it a bridge? What is it I'm at? Is it the White House? Is it the Blue House? Should we add 17 stories to it? Where are my wings? I also thought of A Face in the Crowd. But lastly, I thought of the book. Not the TV series, not the British TV series, not the American TV series with Kevin Spacey, the book House of Cards. For years, literally since this began in 2015, I have thought that there was only one known already printed literary conclusion to this entire nightmare of Donald Trump as candidate for office, as commentator about public events, and finally as president of the United States, and now as repeat president of the United States, and as potential dictator of the United States. There was only one possible literary outcome, and I would like to read it to you now. It's a few paragraphs, because if you've seen House of Cards, first off, if you've seen the British edition, you love it. If you've seen the American edition, you asked, why is it 487 episodes long? Why have they slowed it down to the point where an hour of the TV show only covers an hour of their lives? They kind of stretched that thing out, padding it a little bit. The British series is, I believe, complete with 6 episodes, and it is masterfully done by Ian Richardson, and as we used to say at ESPN, it moves like a rocket. Not so the American edition, but the key factor is, in each of the ends of both of these shows, the British and the American versions, in the end of the first series, the lead character, Prime Minister Urquhart, and in the American version, President Underwood, by their own hands, kills a woman reporter. In the British case, he throws her off the roof of the Houses of Parliament after he confesses to her of his other crimes. This is not how the book ends. The book ends, it was written by Michael Dobbs with no idea that there would be sequels. In Britain, they made it into 3 series, and as I mentioned, in this country, they made it into 7,000 different episodes, and they don't play it anymore because the whole Kevin Spacey thing. However, this is not what the book says. The book offers a different kind of ending altogether. The same scenario in which the woman reporter, Maddie Storin, actually records his confession. And in the TV series, he then throws her off the roof. And the animating part of the next 2 series is what happened to the tape recording that she made of him confessing after she is dead in a car parked next to Parliament. That's not how the book ends. And I have thought, and I was reminded of this because he's wandering around the roof of this, and I'm going to take the liberty of probably violating their copyright and reading about 4 paragraphs. So you know this. So you know that this is what I thought at first glance when I saw Trump on the roof of the White House. "You can't prove a thing. It's your word against mine," he whispered. Maddie said nothing at first, but pressed the rewind button on her recorder. As the tape spun round, she looked down upon Urquhart, who was shivering violently. "Your final mistake, Mr. Urquhart. You thought I switched it off." She punched yet another button. As she did so, the clearly recorded words of their conversation filled the air, damning him in every syllable, the proof which would condemn him. As she walked slowly away, leaving him wretched in the snow, the silence in his head was filled with the ghostly, mocking laughter of his father. The setting sun pierced through the frosty sky. As it did so, it glanced off the snow-covered tower of Big Ben and cascaded into 1,000 tiny streams of light, blinding the American tourist who was trying to capture the scene on video. He was quite clear later in his description of what had happened. The Parliament building had suddenly become like a great torch set alight by the sun. It was really a beautiful sight, as if the whole building were ablaze. And then, from way up under Big Ben, something seemed to fall, as if a moth had flown into the heart of an immense candle, and its blackened and charred body was falling all the way to the ground. It's difficult to believe it was a man, one of your politicians. What did you say his name was? So the original end of House of Cards, Prime Minister Urquhart confesses to his crimes while being secretly recorded, and instead of killing the reporter, he throws himself off the roof. And I say that because it might have been difficult to tell that that's what's happening from my otherwise brilliant and compelling reading of the original Michael Hobbs novel because, and you will reach this conclusion quickly, the job that Hobbs and the other producers, and especially the actors, like the late Ian Richardson, did in creating the BBC version of House of Cards is spectacular, and the novel House of Cards... Anyway, that's how all this would end were it a novel. Also of interest here, a novel is fiction, and so apparently is the President's Council on Physical Fitness. Here's a shock. Trump named a member of the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles to it after said member had declined. Announced he was on it, and then the guy says, no, I'm not. I never agreed to it. Adding to the fact that everybody else, including 2 star TV sportscasters and 2 sports league commissioners, did not decline the appointment, so they are now members of a commission featuring a registered sex offender who was arrested for statutory rape. The President's Council on Total Lack of Fitness? What do Tony Romo, Wayne Gretzky, Gary Bettman, and Roger Goodell do now? That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead on this edition of Countdown, almost Friday. Haven't done a lot of Thurber lately. Let's go Thursdays with Thurber. A Box to Hide In is great. Walter Mitty, they have made many movies about. Even the Catbird Seat movies. But for my money, his best, most action-filled, most easily visualized, in your head story, the best story to read aloud, is The Night the Bed Fell. Next in Thursdays with Thurber. First, believe it or not, there's still more new idiots to talk about. The roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's other worst persons in the world. The bronze worst, Sean, how's this pronounced? Doofy? D-U-F-F-Y. Duffy? Anyway, he's the Secretary of Transportation and NASA, because everybody has to do 2 jobs now because Trump's keeping all the money for himself. This is also what happens when you do not hire qualified people to run a government. You cast them because in your senility and dotage and madness, you think they look good on TV and that all the shit they're supposed to do takes care of itself. This is Duffy, who can't get the air traffic control centers fully staffed, and we put him in charge of a new project, building nuclear reactors on the moon. I'm going to point out that to get nuclear material with which to operate nuclear reactors to the moon, you're going to have to send nuclear material up in a rocket. Presumably an Elon Musk rocket. Maybe a Jeff Bezos rocket made out of cardboard. So the odds are high that the rocket is going to blow up on or near the launch pad. So you have now spread all the nuclear material all over, say, Texas, or the whole hemisphere. But first, you've blown the nuclear material up. Great plan, Duff man. But let's just say you don't blow it up somehow and you actually build a nuclear reactor on the moon, because that way you can build a house in which Captain Scarlet and the Thunderbirds and the other Jerry Anderson marionettes can live in while they run, space. Pew, 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 pew. Nuclear reactions to help fuel homes on the moon. Why does this sound so familiar? Oh, Oh, right. This was the plot ad in the 2002 remake of the movie The Time Machine, where in the year 2037, just 12 years from now, they try nuclear reactions on the moon and destroy the moon. They literally break it into little pieces, and the debris comes out of the sky and hits us and makes Earth uninhabitable for like 700,000 years. And worst of all, the only human left is the actor Guy Pearce. Was this the plan? Great job, Secretary of Reality TV, Sean Duffy. The runner-up, worser, the New York Times. The great journalist James Fallows keeps pointing this out, and the Times keeps doubling down anyway. The Harvard Crimson campus newspaper, a real news organization still operating in Boston, keeps reporting that the reports that the school is negotiating a $500 million bribe of Trump, like the one Columbia is doing, like the one Brown is doing, that these reports are false. The Crimson quotes Harvard President Alan Garber as insisting he is doing no such thing and would do no such thing, yet the reports continue in the New York Times because somebody in the Trump administration is using Times reporters as stenographers. Day after bloody day. Are they negotiating? What is the right way to negotiate? Why would Harvard pay $500 million when Brown is only paying $50 million? The Times, as James Fallows notes, keeps doubling down without even noting the denials from the president of Harvard, or the story in the Harvard Crimson, or the next story in the Harvard Crimson, or the one after that. Quoting the Times, by the start of last week, Harvard University had signaled its readiness, and that's got an underscore on it, indicating it's a link to something, and I'll explain that in a moment. By the start of last week, Harvard University had signaled its readiness to meet President Trump's demand that it spend $500 million to settle its damaging months-long battle with the administration and restore its critical... Bribe Trump. That's the translation. The Times is looking for a way to say bribe Trump, but it's afraid to, because the New York Times is now made up of cowards. Also, the link had signaled its readiness. The New York Times link is to another New York Times story. So in this New York Times story, which is clearly wrong, they use as supporting evidence another New York Times story that is also clearly wrong. You know what this is called? This is called not being a good newspaper anymore. The Times also is not noting what Brian Beutler wrote about last week. If you are a Columbia student or Brown student, or if they are right somehow, a Harvard student, and it is your racial data and your admissions details that would be turned over to Trump, you have a lawsuit against your school. You might have a class action lawsuit. Hell, if you're an alum who just saw the value of his degree or her degree plummet in your workplace because your alma mater is collaborating with Nazis, you might have a lawsuit. What if you're a donor? Hi, Columbia? I'd like my $12 million back. Oh, you put it in a building? Tough shit. I want it back. But the Times just keeps throwing this crap against the wall, and sadly, with all of this repeated instances of throwing crap against the wall that benefits Trump, and all of the both sidesist stories, and all of the headlines that have been put through the defactualization machine, and all of the refusals to call Trump crazy, and all the refusals to say he's lying when he's lying, we now have to ask, is the Times actively positioning itself to be a tool of the fascists? Is the Times officially now collaborating with Trump? And if so, why are any of us patronizing it or believing it? But the winners, the worst, worse than that, everybody who is on and whoever is running the new President's Council on Physical Fitness. Note that's physical fitness, not mental fitness, since we have a president who is opposed to mental fitness. Also, it doesn't say anything about ethical fitness because it's pretty clear whoever announced this lies. A lot. And without skill. Who in the Trump administration does that description fit? The council will include Executive Director Catherine Granito, Chair Bryson DeChambeau, Saquon Barkley, Gary Bettman, Nick Bosa, Harrison Butker, also known in the NFL as Harrison Buttkiss, Cody Campbell, Roger Goodell, Wayne Gretzky, Nelly Corda, Paul Triple H Levesque, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, Mariano Rivera, Tony Romo, Annika Sorenstam, Tua Tagovailoa, Lawrence Taylor, Matthew Tkachuk, and Mariano Rivera. And Mariano Rivera, that's not me. They listed him twice. And I know it's Tagovailoa. I was just doing a Trump pronunciation of Tagovailoa. He listed Mariano Rivera twice. There's Gary Player, Mariano Rivera, Tony Romo, Sorenstam, and Mariano Rivera. He's on it twice. Well, Mariano Rivera has two faces, so maybe he should be listed twice. Problem number one. This was announced during a Philadelphia Eagles practice. So afterwards, the reporters asked Philadelphia Eagles running back Saquon Barkley about it. He said it was news to him. He never accepted a position on this council. Quote, a couple months ago, it was brought to my team about the council, so I'm not really too familiar with it. I felt like I'm going to be super busy, so me and my family thought it would probably be of best interest to not accept that. I was definitely a little shocked when my name was mentioned. I'm assuming it's something great, so I appreciate it, but I was a little shocked when my name was mentioned. And this guy had gone to the White House to meet Trump and said he respected the office at least, and Trump still lied about him. Of course, the real problem with this president's council is that the reputations of everybody else but Saquon Barkley are now damaged, if not ruined. They are now all sharing an official government commission position with a registered sex offender, a man arrested for statutory rape, the former New York Giant Lawrence Taylor, who's listed there between the two Mariano Riveras. What he's guilty of, what he was arrested for, this is by definition pedophilia. So ruined the reputations. Well, Bryson DeChambeau doesn't have any reputation. He's a piece of shit. But Annika Sorenstam on a panel with a registered sex offender? Mariano Rivera on a panel with a registered sex offender? Twice on a panel with a registered sex offender? Jack Nicklaus on a panel with a registered sex offender? He's also a piece of shit. Matthew Tkachuk, just this week, named the cover player on EA Sports video game EA Hockey, the new face of hockey, on a panel with a registered sex offender? And think of the front-facing people. Can CBS still put Tony Romo on its football broadcasts now that he's on a panel with a registered sex offender? Can TNT put Wayne Gretzky on TV now that he's on a panel with a registered sex offender? And wait, the commissioner of the National Football League, Roger Goodell, can he remain commissioner if he's on a panel with a registered sex offender? Is the league not, through Goodell, normalizing what Lawrence Taylor did? And wait, the commissioner of the National Hockey League, Gary Bettman, can he remain commissioner of the National Hockey League if he's on a panel with a registered sex offender? I mean, Lawrence Taylor was already Roger Goodell's problem, and Roger Goodell clearly doesn't care about anything. He's Roger Goodell. If I were Roger Goodell, I would get a facelift, and I'd change my name. Lawrence Taylor was already the NFL's problem. Now he's hockey's problem, too? Nice work, Gary Bettman. You just destroyed hockey for the sake of Lawrence Taylor and Donald Trump. The president's new council on fitness and stuff. Remember, ETTD, everything Trump touches dies. And the old Groucho Marx jokes certainly applies here to Gretzky and Rivera and Bettman and Goodell and the others. You should never want to belong to any Trump club that would have you as a member. Today's worst persons in the world! As we said, Thursdays with Thurber now, since there's no Friday podcast, and we have not done any Thurber in a long time. And as I said before the break, I think this is the best story to read aloud that he ever wrote. And I will point out, as I have made many times, this analogy. In terms of humor, James Thurber was the 20th century's Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani from baseball, who at times has been baseball's best pitcher and at times has been baseball's best hitter. Shohei Ohtani of the Los Angeles Dodgers is almost necessarily the most valuable player every year because he can do, as well as anybody else, or nearly, two things when most other players can only excel at one thing. Such is the story of James Thurber. James Thurber was a brilliant writer, and in his spare time, he was an equally brilliant, almost avant-garde artist in the same body. His simple drawings depict the most complex of emotions and comedic situations. His dogs are immortal, and then there were his captions. Well, I can't do anything with his drawings in a podcast, so I'll just read. And I will read you now in this episode what is probably his most famous story. From My Life in Hard Times, The Night the Bed Fell, by James Thurber. I suppose that the high water mark of my youth in Columbus, Ohio, was the night the bed fell on my father. It makes a better recitation unless, as some friends of mine have said, one has heard it 5 or 6 times than it does a piece of writing, for it is almost necessary to throw furniture around, shake doors, and bark like a dog to lend the proper atmosphere and verisimilitude to what is admittedly a somewhat incredible tale. Still, it did take place. It happened then that my father had decided to sleep in the attic one night, to be away where he could think. My mother opposed the notion strongly because she said the old wooden bed up there was unsafe, it was wobbly, and the heavy headboard would crash down on Father's head in case the bed fell and kill him. There was no dissuading him, however, and at 10:15 he closed the attic door behind him and went up the narrow, twisting stairs. We later heard ominous creakings as he crawled into bed. Grandfather, who usually slept in the attic bed when he was with us, had disappeared some days before. On those occasions, he was usually gone 6 or 8 days and returned growling and out of temper with the news that the federal union was run by a passel of blockheads and that the Army of the Potomac didn't have any more chance than a fiddler's bitch. We had visiting us at the time a nervous first cousin of mine named Briggs Beale, who believed that he was likely to cease breathing when he was asleep. It was his feeling that if he were not awakened every hour during the night, he might die of suffocation. He had been accustomed to setting an alarm clock to ring at intervals until morning, but I persuaded him to abandon this. He slept in my room, and I told him that I was such a light sleeper that if anybody quit breathing in the same room with me, I would wake instantly. He tested me the first night, which I had suspected he would, by holding his breath after my regular breathing had convinced him I was asleep. I was not asleep, however, and called to him. This seemed to allay his fears a little, but he took the precaution of putting a glass of spirits of camphor on a little table at the head of his bed. In case I didn't arouse him until he was almost gone, he said, he would sniff the camphor, a powerful reviver. Briggs was not the only member of his family who had his crotchets. Old Aunt Melissa Beale, who could whistle like a man with 2 fingers in her mouth, suffered under the premonition that she was destined to die on South High Street because she had been born on South High Street and married on South High Street. Then there was Aunt Sarah Schoaf, who never went to bed at night without the fear that a burglar was going to get in and blow chloroform under her door through a tube. To avert this calamity, for she was in greater dread of anesthetics than of losing her household goods, she always piled her money, silverware, and other valuables in a neat stack just outside her bedroom, with a note reading, "This is all I have. Please take it and do not use your chloroform, as this is all I have." Aunt Gracie Schoaf also had a burglar phobia, but she met it with more fortitude. She was confident that burglars had been getting into her house every night for 40 years. The fact that she never missed anything was to her no proof to the contrary. She always claimed that she scared them off before they could take anything by throwing shoes down the hallway. When she went to bed, she piled, where she could get at them handily, all the shoes there were about her house. 5 minutes after she had turned off the light, she would sit up in bed and say, "Hark!" Her husband, who had learned to ignore the whole situation as long ago as 1903, would either be sound asleep or pretend to be sound asleep. In either case, he would not respond to her tugging and pulling, so that presently she would arise, tiptoe to the door, open it slightly, and heave a shoe down the hall in one direction, and its mate down the hall in the other direction. Some nights she threw them all. Some nights, only a couple of pair. But I am straying from the remarkable incidents that took place during the night that the bed fell on Father. By midnight, we were all in bed. The layout of the rooms and the disposition of their occupants is important to an understanding of what later occurred. In the front room upstairs, just under Father's attic bedroom, were my mother and my brother Herman, who sometimes sang in his sleep, usually marching through Georgia or onward Christian soldiers. Briggs Beale and myself were in a room adjoining this one. My brother Roy was in a room across the hall from ours. Our bull terrier Rex slept in the hall. My bed was an army cot, one of those affairs which are made wide enough to sleep on comfortably only by putting up, flat with the middle section, the two sides which ordinarily hang down like the sideboards of a drop-leaf table. When these sides are up, it is perilous to roll too far toward the edge, for then the cot is likely to tip completely over, bringing the whole bed down on top of one with a tremendous banging crash. This, in fact, is precisely what happened. About 2 o'clock in the morning. It was my mother who, in recalling the scene later, first referred to it as the night the bed fell on your father. Always a deep sleeper and slow to arouse, I had lied to Briggs. I was at first unconscious of what had happened when the iron cot rolled me onto the floor and toppled over on me. It left me still warmly bundled up and unhurt, for the bed rested above me like a canopy. Hence I did not wake up, only reached the edge of consciousness and went back. The racket, however, instantly awakened my mother in the next room, who came to the immediate conclusion that her worst dread was realized. The big wooden bed upstairs had fallen on Father. She therefore screamed, "Let's go to your poor father!" It was this shout, rather than the noise of my cot falling, that awakened Herman in the same room with her. He thought that Mother had become, for no apparent reason, hysterical. "You're all right, Mama," he shouted, trying to calm her. They exchanged shout for perhaps 10 seconds. "Let's go to your poor father," and "You're all right." That woke up Briggs. By this time, I was conscious of what was going on in a vague way, but did not yet realize that I was under my bed instead of on it. Briggs, awakening in the midst of loud shouts of fear and apprehension, came to the quick conclusion that he was suffocating and that we were all trying to bring him out. With a low moan, he grasped the glass of camphor at the head of his bed, and instead of sniffing it, he poured it over himself. The room reeked of camphor. Choked Briggs like a drowning man, for he had almost succeeded in stopping his breath under the deluge of pungent spirits. He leaped out of bed and groped toward the open window, but he came up against one that was closed. With his hand, he beat out the glass, and I could hear it crash and tinkle on the alleyway below. It was at this juncture that I, in trying to get up, had the uncanny sensation of feeling my bed above me. Foggy with sleep, I now suspected in my turn that the whole uproar was being made in a frantic endeavor to extricate me from what must be an unheard of and perilous situation. "Get me out of this!" I bawled. "Get me out!" I think I had the nightmarish belief that I was entombed in a mine. Gasped Briggs, floundering in his camphor. By this time, my mother, still shouting, pursued by Herman, still shouting, was trying to open the door to the attic in order to go up and get my father's body out of the wreckage. The door, was stuck, however, and would not yield. Her frantic pulls on it only added to the general banging and confusion. Roy and the dog were now up, the one shouting questions, the other barking. Father, farthest away and soundest sleeper of all, had by this time been awakened by the battering on the attic door. He decided that the house was on fire. I'm coming, he wailed in a slow, sleepy voice. It took him many minutes to regain full consciousness. My mother, still believing he was caught under the bed, detected in his "I'm coming" the mournful, resigned note of one who is preparing to meet his maker. He's dying, she shouted. I'm all right, Briggs yelled to reassure her. I'm all right. He still believed that it was his own closeness to death that was worrying Mother. I found at last the light switch in my room, unlocked the door, and Briggs and I joined the others at the attic door. The dog, who never did like Briggs, jumped for him, assuming that he was the culprit in whatever was going on, and Roy had to throw Rex and hold him. We could hear Father crawling out of the bed upstairs. Roy pulled the attic door open with a mighty jerk, and Father came down the stairs, sleepy and irritable, but safe and sound. My mother began to weep when she saw him. Rex began to howl. What in the name of God is going on here? Asked Father. The situation was finally put together like a giant jigsaw puzzle. Father caught a cold from prowling around in his bare feet, but there were no other bad results. I'm glad, said Mother, who always looked on the bright side of things, that your grandfather wasn't here. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Most of our countdown music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, produced by TKO Brothers. Mr. Ray on guitars, bass, and drums. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., is our sports music. Other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. James Thurber's The Night the Bed Fell was written by James Thurber. The copyright abides, and it is held by the Thurber Literary Trust. My announcer today is my friend Tony Kornheiser, and everything else was, as always, my fault. That's Countdown for today, day 200 of America Held Hostage again. Just 1,263 days until the scheduled end of Trump's lame duck, lame-brained term, unless he is removed sooner by MAGA and Jeffrey Epstein or the actuarial tables or wandering around the White House roof. No, don't go near the edge. No. The next scheduled countdown is Monday. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.